Directors. It is May 19th at 1 o'clock. I'm calling this meeting to order. Mr. General Manager, can you determine whether or not we have a quorum?
Yes, Madam Chair, Director Don Deere.
Here.
Chairwoman Gloria Gray.
Here.
Director Scott Houston. Director Tommy Fabai. Director Desi Alvarez. Madam Chair, we do not have a quorum of the Board of Directors. However, we do have both members of our Water Policy and Legislative Committee, so we are able to proceed.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone from the public who wishes to speak?
Madam Chair, we have not received any requests for public comment, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If there's any member of the public that would like to speak, please indicate so by raising your virtual hand. And Madam Chair, I do not see any requests.
Thank you. Item 4, presentations. Any presentations?
Staff has no presentations today.
Thank you. Item 5, action calendar. Would you please introduce the action agendas, please? Items.
Yes, Madam Chair. This first item begins on packet page 3, and the item is 5A. It's adopt a support position on HR 2940, Advancing Water Reuse Act. And for this presentation, we do have Matt Bay, our Water Policy and Resources Manager.
Thank you, EJ, and good afternoon, Chair Gray and Director Deere. As EJ said, this item begins on page 3 of the packet. And we'll actually go ahead and skip forward to page 11 of the packet, which is where the slides begin. So it is an action item today, and staff is seeking consideration by the committee to adopt or to recommend a support position on HR 2940, which is the Advancing Water Reuse Act. If we can go to the next slide, please. Ray. Thank you. So this legislation was introduced last month on April 17th by Representative Darren LaHood, who's a Republican from Illinois. However, this is a bipartisan effort. There were both Republicans and Democrats that co-sponsored this bill. That includes Democrat Linda Sanchez from California. And really, to just kind of boil it down, what this bill proposes to do is to implement a 30% tax credit, investment tax credit for qualified investments in qualifying water reuse projects. And I'll get into a little more details on that in the next slide. However, I do want to let the committee know that West Basin has really played a kind of a big role in this, in the initial parts of this legislation. We've coordinated with water reuse for the last year and a half. We've met with water reuse this year and last year when we were in Washington, D.C. We met with their staff. We've also worked with our federal delegation. This is one of the topics that has come up this year in our Washington, D.C. advocacy trip. We've also been coordinating with some others in the water and kind of the broader water reuse community, as well as some of the other states that are, thinking about investing in these types of projects moving forward. And West Basin actually did serve somewhat as a case study. As the directors know, we've had 30 years of providing recycled water to industrial customers in the region. And because of that, we have a lot of very helpful, beneficial information to share with water reuse as they were working with their Congress people to develop this legislation. A number of other states are starting to look at recycled water, to look at making investments in industrial recycled water use, and so West Basin is really a resource for them and for water reuse at large to consider going forward. Next slide, please. Just to provide some insight into what does a qualifying water reuse project look like. There's a few different situations that the legislation spells out at this time. That could be amended in the future, but for now, what they're kind of primarily focusing on is one, a project that would install, replace, or modify an on-site water recycling system. So this would be on the property of an industrial customer, for instance, a refinery, which we do have. But it could also be within an industrial and a manufacturing, data centers, or food processing facilities. Data centers have been called out more recently because they are kind of quickly growing throughout the nation, and they're very heavy water users for their size. So on-site is one. The next would be to replace the use of fresh water, so drinking water, or it could be groundwater, with recycled water from a municipal water provider for the production of goods or provision of services. And then the third situation there is to build or expand a municipal water recycling system for the purpose of securing and providing recycled water for production of goods or services. These are all opportunities that we could explore as West Basin. Others in California could as well. And then again, the hope is to see that other states would consider investments in recycled water in the future as well. There's also currently a sunset on this legislation, so it would look to kind of spur investments over the next roughly 7 years. But currently, the bill's written to expire on December 31st of 2032. Next slide. So benefits to West Basin. So earlier this year, the board of directors adopted our updated legislative and regulatory priorities. And within that, we had added a new kind of provision that would support policies and programs that incentivize industrial investments in on-site reuse, municipal water recycling infrastructure, and recycled water purchases in lieu of drinking water sources. And this aligns, perfectly with what this legislation proposes to do. Obviously, it could give opportunities to West Basin in the future, but as I mentioned, also for others, both in this state and in others. And this also serves to show and prove to some of our industrial partners that we work with already that we are continuing to look for ways to be innovative and to look for policies that can benefit them in the future as well. So if we can move to the last slide, I'll go ahead and make the final recommendation, and that would be that the board adopt a support position on HR 2940 by Congressman LaHood, which is the Advancing Water Reuse Act. That concludes my remarks. I don't know if the general manager has anything else to add before I take questions.
No. Great job.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Great presentation. Any questions, Director Deere?
No questions.
Can I move the recommendation with support?
Second.
All right, so we do move the recommendation with support. So we go to the next item. EJ, could you introduce that one, please, or Matt? Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair. This next item begins on back page 16. This item is 5B, adopt a support position on AB 259, open meetings, local agency teleconferences. For this presentation, we have Augustine Hahn, our Water Policy and Resources Development Analyst.
Thank you, EJ. Chairwoman Gray, Director Deere, thank you for allowing us to present this proposal to you. I will call your attention to presentation on page 44 of the agenda packet. And so in summary, this bill was introduced January 16th by Assemblymember Blanca Rubio, based out of West Covina. This bill is sponsored by CSDA, the California Special Districts Association, along with Three Valleys Municipal Water District. And what this bill does is it would extend the sunset provisions added to the Brown Act by AB 2449, which was adopted back in 2022. And so this would extend that sunset provision to January 1, 2030. And I can cover more about AB 2449 in the next slide. And so for more background, AB 2449 is applicable to individual board members rather than the entire agency, and is concerned with specific just cause and emergency circumstances. Since 2022, AB 2449 has been utilized by various agencies, allowing remote participation for legislative policymakers that may otherwise have been encumbered by illness, official travel, or medical emergency. This bill is supported by a large coalition of water agencies and special districts. This bill was just heard in the Assembly, I believe last week. It passed 73-0 unanimously, and now moves on to the Senate. Just to kind of fill you in on the level of support this bill has, the supporters include Aqua, CMUA, Metropolitan Water District, Cayugas, Eastern, IEUA, Las Virgenes, MODOC, Upper District, Western, and also the LA County Sanitation Districts and the County Board of Supervisors. Moving on to the next slide. As far as a benefit to West Basin, by extending the sunset, AB 259 preserves the additional flexibility for individual board members of local agencies looking to meet remotely to continue providing the public with essential services. It provides additional options for carrying forward the board's work in the event of just causes and emergency circumstances. So moving on to the next slide. The staff recommendation would be that the board adopt a support position on AB 259, open meetings, local agencies, teleconferences. Concludes the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Augustine. Director Dare, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
I don't have any questions. Thank you for the thorough presentation. Can we move it forward, Director Dare, with the recommendation?
I agree, yes.
Yes, okay. Yes, we do move it forward with the recommendation from the committee. EJ, the next item.
Yes, Madam Chair, that brings us to our information calendar. And the first update that we have is item 6A. It's our quarterly Safe Clean Water Program update. And for this presentation, we have Matt Bay, Manager of Water Policy and Resources, as well as Augustine Hahn and Tammy Hurley Hahn.
Great, thank you, EJ. And I'll go ahead and have Augustine kick us off with the slides that begin on page 76 of the packet.
Thank you, EJ and Matt. Members of the committee, I'll point your attention to the PowerPoint presentation that we have up before you. And so just a little background information about the Safe Clean Water Program, the watershed area steering committees, and the stormwater investment plans. In November of 2018, Los Angeles County voters passed Measure W, which created the Safe Clean Water Program and parcel tax. Under that program, the watershed area steering committees are tasked with developing funding plans and recommendations referred to as stormwater investment plans. And this is to utilize the funding that's made available by Measure W under their regional programs. Stormwater investment plans for all watershed area steering committees are adopted by the WASCs, or the area steering committees, and then are sent to the regional oversight committee for review before being considered by the County Board of Supervisors for full adoption. Just as far as how staff engages, West Basin participates in the Central Santa Monica Bay and South Santa Monica Bay area watershed area steering committees. In the next few slides, we'll be covering the activities of those two WASCs. And as a reminder, there was a pause on applications for infrastructure projects across the Safe Clean Water Program in fiscal year 25. And if we could move on to the next slide, please. Yes, so over the past quarter, members of the Central Santa Monica Bay Watershed Area Steering Committee reviewed 4 technical resource projects, 2 scientific studies, and 2 project modification requests. Each of those projects were presented to the committee and discussed at length. And then in April, the Watershed Area Steering Committee recommended the following projects in the Stormwater Investment Plan. Those are listed on the PowerPoint slide before you. That resulted in 3 technical resource projects, 2 scientific studies, and 2 project modification requests. We can move on to the next slide. This is a bit of a review of the funds that are available within the Central Santa Monica Bay WASC. And so with the adoption of the Stormwater Investment Plan, the Central Santa Monica Bay WASC has allocated 91% of funding available for fiscal year 26. It also commits 74% of anticipated funding for fiscal year 27 before we see a larger drop off in fiscal year 28. That concludes the update on Central Santa Monica Bay. I will pass it off to Tammy.
Thank you, Augustine. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Gray, Director Duke. So just a brief update on the South Santa Monica Bay Watershed Area Steering Committee. Yeah, thank you for mentioning the slide. So during the past 3 months, members of this watershed area reviewed 2 project modification requests for stormwater projects. These are located in the cities of Lomita and Redondo Beach. And in addition, the members received presentation and information on 2 scientific studies. So last month, in April, the members did approve recommendations for the fiscal year 2025-26 Stormwater Investment Plan to be submitted to the Regional Oversight Committee for their review. So the recommended Stormwater Investment Plan does include these projects. 2 scientific studies. One is on the Data-Driven Resource Optimization and Planning System, also referred to as the acronym DROPS, D-R-O-P-S, DROPS for LA County. And then the second scientific study is on DPAVE LA, which is to prioritize parking lots for green retrofitting. And then 2 projects. One would be for the city of Redondo Beach. It is the Fulton Playfield Multi-Benefit Infiltration Project. And then the second one would be for the city of Lomita in their downtown area. It's a multi-benefit stormwater project. If we can move to the next slide, please. So the Stormwater Investment Plan, this is an annual 5-year plan recommending funding for allocation of projects and programs in the upcoming fiscal year, as well as the anticipated recommendations for the next 4 years. So the South Santa Monica Bay received $17.4 million in annual regional program funding. And in the recommended Stormwater Investment Plan, a total of 52% of funding has been allocated for projects for the South Santa Monica Bay. And with that, we can summarize a little bit more. I'll turn it over to Matt Bay if we can wrap this update.
Sure. And I'd just like to say that, sorry, Desiree, if you could go back to the previous slide just real quick. This year it took several meetings to kind of finalize the investment plan. This is a pretty subscribed WASC in terms of dollars that have been obligated to different projects. And I would just like to thank publicly the cities of Redondo Beach and Torrance, because they were agreeable to kind of moving around some of the funding that they had already been given on a couple of the projects that they have, extending it by a year, taking a 1-year pause in between to allow us to fund some projects, stay within budget and stay within kind of the threshold that we needed to. So just appreciate the cooperation and partnership with those 2 cities this year as part of that. Moving to the next slide now. Thank you. And I'll just say that we did include as an attachment on page 51 the presentation for watershed planning. You could read it in its entirety if you'd like to. but I'll just kind of speak to this briefly. So watershed planning, this is something a little new this year. It was requested by some of the committee members last year as something that they would like to explore and talk about with LA County staff, kind of during this pause year where we're not considering any infrastructure projects. And so LA County did spend a lot of time, and they provided a really good overview earlier this month about the watershed planning that's kind of gone on to date. So give them a chance to review some of the program goals that they want to look at going forward, to look at and explore some of the unique aspects of each of the different watershed areas, which there's, several of those. This program is now 5 years old. And, a lot of projects have been funded so far, a lot of studies. I would say that it's probably fair to say that a lot of the low hanging fruit has been kind of picked already somewhat. And so now it's the kind of the challenge and the opportunity to look for new opportunities kind of throughout all of the region to do some of these more larger, widespread, coordinated projects. A lot of these have been individual projects in different cities, in the city of LA and the South Bay, et cetera. But now this gives us a chance to kind of look at the bigger picture. And so that's what LA County has been working on. They've been putting together very comprehensive and detailed targets and performance measures for each of the watershed areas, looking at, how at their planning that needs to be done in the years ahead. What are the needs of each of the individual watersheds going forward? And then what are those kind of multi-benefit opportunities that do exist for us to work together, both within our watersheds, but also with the other watersheds that exist out there. And there is like a little snapshot of the new planning tool that LA County put together. I think it's still kind of in development and progress, but it was very, very informational, very helpful. So it's going to be something that we rely on in future years of serving on the committee is looking at that planning tool and give us opportunity to work with our other cities, with our other partners in other watershed areas. So it's something that I'm looking forward to working on, and my staff will be as well with our partners on those committees. So with that said, that concludes our Safe Clean Water quarterly update, but staff is here and happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Madam Chair, did you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. Any questions, Director Deere?
No, I don't. Thank you.
All right, you guys, thank you very much for the presentation. We'll go to the next item, please.
Yes, Madam Chair, that brings us to item 6B. It's our monthly state and federal legislative update. And for this presentation, we have Augustine Hahn as well as Matt Bay for the presentation.
Thank you, EJ. Members of the committee, I will direct your attention to the presentation that has been shared as a handout and is also on the screen for you. If we could move to the next slide, please. Yes, so the 2025 legislative session is we're making our way through the legislative session in 2025, and we have a couple key deadlines coming up. The legislature just passed the House of Origin Policy Committee deadline this past Friday. Currently, all fiscal bills are being sent to the Appropriations Committee. Bills passed out of that committee, bills passed are being sent to the floor, and others are being held in the suspense file. The suspense file will be dispensed on May the 23rd, which also corresponds with the deadline. And last year, both houses held over 25% of the bills in their respective committees, although that was under better budget circumstances. June 6th is the next major deadline in which all bills need to be passed out of their House of Origin to continue moving forward this session. Next slide, please. This May, the governor announced the release of the May revise to his proposed budget. The budget cites a projected $7.5 billion deficit. Governor Newsom cites the impacts of federal tariff policies for the deficit. And it includes $12 billion in corrective budget actions to address the deficit. This includes pulling $7.1 billion from the rainy day fund. The proposal ultimately projects a total general fund reserve of $15.7 billion for 25-26. And specific to water, the governor proposed the following water-related policies. He proposes statutory changes to streamline administrative processes for the Delta Conveyance Project, which will save time and reduce costs to adapt the state water project to the effects of climate change and protect against earthquake risks. This proposal preserves environmental protections and promotes efficiency and expediency, accelerating the state's most important surface water supply and climate adaptation project. This would also help secure water supplies for more than 27 million Californians within the service area and supports what would be the 8th largest economy in the world. Next slide, please. In April, Assembly Speaker Rivas announced the chair and members of Assembly Select Committees. The West Basin Coalition members that were named to those committees are listed on the PowerPoint in front of you. Just wanted to call your attention to those members that are serving on these select committees that handle specific issues that the legislature deems of importance. Moving on to the next slide, please. And then just an update on the state bill report. I will try and make my way through these relatively quickly, but AB 523 is the proposal that would allow for single member metropolitan water district agencies to have a proxy vote. The bill is sponsored by Eastern Municipal Water District. The bill has passed the Assembly and now moves on to the Senate. This bill was brought before the Metropolitan Water District Board for consideration, but the board ultimately did not take a position on the bill. Staff will continue to keep tracking and provide updates as required. SB 72 is a proposal that would require the California Water Plan to update the interim planning target for 2050. This bill is sponsored by CMUA. The bill is currently in Senate Appropriations. The West Basin Board adopted a support position back in February, and it is widely supported in the water industry. Aqua, Water Reuse California, and Metropolitan Water District being some examples. On to the next bill, SB 454 by Senator McNerney is a proposal to create the PFAS Mitigation Fund to help agencies deal with the impacts of PFAS. This bill is co-sponsored by the League of California Cities and Aqua. This bill is currently in the Senate Appropriations Committee. This may be a bill of interest to the West Basin Board, and it lists the following supporters: CMUA, CSDA, Cal Nevada AWWA, and Metropolitan Water District. AB 532 by Assemblymember Ransom would provide the statutory authority for agencies to implement water rate assistance programs. This, of course, is a bill sponsored by CMUA and is also in Assembly Appropriations. The West Basin Board adopted a support position on this bill this past April, and it is also widely supported within the water industry. Moving on, SB 31 by Senator McNerney would clarify and expand uses under the recycled water policy. This bill is currently in Senate Appropriations and is sponsored by Water Reuse California. This is also a bill that West Basin has, the West Basin Board has already adopted a support position on back in March, and is also widely supported within the water industry. It includes some of the organizations that I previously mentioned, along with Cal Chamber. SB 682 by our Senator Allen would prohibit the distribution and selling of products that contain PFAS, a source control type of measure. This bill is currently in Senate Appropriations. It is sponsored by CASA, along with the Clean Water Action and NRDC. This bill may be a bill of interest to the West Basin Board, and it lists the following supporters: Aqua, Water Reuse California, and Water Replenishment District. Moving on to the second bill by Senator Allen that we have for you today, SB 601 seeks to create Waters of the State. This bill is sponsored by the Coast Keeper and Defenders of Wildlife. This bill is currently in Senate Appropriations, which was heard earlier today. That was placed in the suspense file, which is to be dispensed by the end of this week. Staff will continue to track this bill. The bill will face significant opposition from the water industry, ag, industrial, construction trades, and local governments. On to the last bill that we have before you today. AB 795 would allow State Water Resources Control Board to adopt emergency regulations for drinking water in accordance with the federal standards previously adopted for PFAS. There is a recent federal action regarding this topic, which will be covered later in the update. But the bill is supported by a coalition of environmental, public health, and community-based organizations. The bill is currently in Assembly Appropriations, and staff will continue to track this bill. Currently, Aqua, Cal Chamber, League of Cities, CMUA, and Water Reuse are listed in opposition to this bill. That concludes the bill report. And we'll move on to the next slide. One more update from you from the state side of the update. On April 29th, DWR announced a state water project allocation of 50% of requested supplies in water year 25. California's snowpack peaked on April 4th at 100% for the season. With spring warming, the snowpack is beginning to melt and flow into California's watersheds and reservoirs. For example, currently Lake Oroville is 120% of average for this date and 95% full. And so DWR made a corresponding change to the allocation for this water year. That concludes the update on the state side. I'll pass it over to Matt for the federal update.
Great. Thank you, Augustine. So I'll now get into the federal update for you. And we move to the next slide. I'll just touch briefly on our 2025 Washington, D.C. advocacy trip that we had 3 weeks ago now. And you can see some of the photos here from the trip. It was very successful. I do want to start off by saying thank you to the 3 directors that were able to join us on that trip. I know it's a long flight both ways, and they're packed days, but the directors all did great. They spoke very well, represented West Basin very well with all of our meetings that we had. So thank you to the directors. I also want to thank our federal lobbyist, BSA, Pete Evich and Jeff Bowman. They're always just do such a great job in putting together all the meetings with both our delegation, with some of the agencies that we meet with out there. So thank you to BSA for representing West Basin very well. We had nearly 15 meetings that we participated in over 2.5 days, presented 3 Legislator of the Year awards, and just to kind of hit on the topics that we covered in most of our meetings, it was The impact of tariffs, federal tariffs on West Basin and on our industry with regards to our membranes that we have to purchase. We also talked frequently about the pure water projects in both Metropolitan Water District and LA's Pure Water Project. Talked about the industrial tax credit legislation. Talked about a conservation rebate piece of legislation that we have a support position on. And then we also touched on kind of the 30 years of recycled water history that we're celebrating this year at West Basin. So again, I hope the directors had good trips out there. Hopefully they've been able to debrief with EJ. But from staff's perspective, we feel that the trip went very well. And just again, want to thank everybody for that participated. Moving to the next slide, please. So I'll just get into a few federal updates now. So last week on May 16th, the House Budget Committee failed to pass a Republican Party line budget bill over some continued concerns that they have with clean energy tax credits, with Medicaid, and with some other issues. The vote failed by a 16-21 vote, with 4 Republicans joining all of the Democrats on that committee and voting against the bill that was focused on taxes, energy, and border security. They're going to continue to negotiate and look at some potential tweaks that could be made to the bill, especially with regards to the energy tax credits that will be needed to advance that measure to the House floor at some point. So we'll continue to track that issue with BSA and bring it back as needed in the future. Next slide. So I'll now talk a little bit about the PFAS maximum contaminant level rule. So last year in 2024, the EPA, the US EPA finalized a MCL for 2 constituents, PFOA and PFOS, as you should say. And those are 2 of kind of the main types of PFAS that we are concerned with out here in California. They set that level at 4 parts per trillion, which is extremely low. It's something that people have had some heartburn with. At the same time, they also set a 10 parts per trillion MCL for some other PFAS constituents at that time. And when they set that, there was a deadline that they had set of 2029 that utilities would need to come into compliance with that MCL. And so again, as I mentioned, there's been some complaints and pushback from the water industry, about the MCL level itself, as well as the timing, how quickly it's going to come into effect. There's significant costs that are expected that are being expended already to get many organizations into compliance. Looking at potentially $37 billion in upfront costs, $650 million in annual operating costs going forward. So this is something that's been expressed to the EPA, to the new EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin. And so just on May 14th, the EPA did announce some changes that they expect to make to the MCL regulation through a process that will start happening this fall. It won't include changing the MCL itself for PFOA and PFOS. However, it would extend the deadline to come into compliance by 2 years to 2031. It would also establish a federal exemption framework. It would launch a PFAS outreach program throughout the country. And then they would also plan to take and look at that 10 parts per trillion MCL for some of those other non-PFOA, PFOS constituents, and potentially relax those or eliminate those. So continued discussion will happen in those areas. So this is an area that we work very closely with both our federal lobbyists as well as our internal compliance team to monitor these updates and to assess impacts to West Basin and to our industry at large. So something that we'll continue to bring back to this committee going forward. Slide. And then next update I just have for you is that President Trump did release kind of the initial details on his FY26 budget request earlier this month. They called that the skinny budget. this is something, it's an intent. It's something that shows what the president's, priorities are, where he's trying to head with what, types of programs and things that he prioritizes. However, it's not binding by any means. It has to go to Congress. It has to, be taken up and considered by both the House and the Senate as they develop their FY26 appropriations bills. However, I did want to point out a couple of things specifically to water, and one would be some proposes a significant cut to both the clean water and drinking water state revolving fund programs from $2.7 billion down to $300 million. I mean, that's basically a 90% cut that you're looking at there. West Basin does have state revolving fund loans funding from some of these programs, so it's something that's of concern to us, as well as the many other California water agencies that utilize those funding programs. And then in addition, there's another $600 million reduction to the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation that's being proposed for non-infrastructure programs such as habitat restoration, which again falls in line with kind of what we've seen from the Trump administration so far. More details about this budget and kind of where it's going next are expected next month in June. And then in the meantime, what we've heard is that the House is expected to kind of mark up their appropriations bills somewhat in line with the president's requests and priorities. However, the Senate has indicated that it's going to be a little more independent in its process and marking things up in a way that aligns with their priorities. So we'll see how that shakes out over the next couple of months. Next slide. So there's been some, in addition to the TPOS, there's been some additional changes to the EPA structure that have been announced. And just to note that when we did go back to Washington, D.C. a few weeks back, staff did meet with the EPA, and they came out very strong when we were there with them. They had about 15 different people in that meeting with us, both in person and online. A lot of their different divisions were represented there. So it was a very good meeting that we had with the EPA, but they are definitely going through some challenges right now based on some reorganizations, some reprioritization of different things. So just to cover, a couple of those. One that I just want to point out is they are planning to eliminate the Office of Waters, Office of Science and Technology, and that includes their water reuse program. On first glance, you're like, oh no, that's not a good thing. We don't want to see a water.
Excuse me, Matt. Matt,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. Yes, Congresswoman Waters is calling me on the phone. Don, do you mind taking over? Is that okay? So I
All
can
right,
take
sure.
her call? Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
That kind of one-ups the federal affairs update. Making our own update.
Speaking of federal affairs, am I okay to proceed, Director? Here? Okay, thank you. So at first glance, that sounds kind of bad, but I think that there is some intent here to actually roll water reuse into a different part of the EPA into the Office of Wastewater Management. And the EPA Administrator, Lee Zeldin, did state recently that the agency will actually be elevating both water reuse and conservation to ensure that those divisional areas have the appropriate resources. And that there could be a new water reuse and conservation branch of the wastewater management division. So not necessarily bad news, but we do want to track that very closely to make sure that both water reuse and conservation continue to be key components of the EPA. There's also been not so good news. There has been some reductions to other EPA offices, which has included either reducing significantly or actually closing some of their environmental justice offices that they have. And that definitely impacts the state of California, where some of those offices are located. So again, this is something that we'll continue to track very closely with BSA in the coming months. Next slide. Okay, and this is an item of interest for some of our directors with regard to wildfire protection and legislation. And so just wanted to mention that last month, Senator Alex Padilla did serve as a co-sponsor in introducing a major forest health and wildlife reduction bill. It's Senate Bill 1462, which is known as the Fix Our Forests Act. This is another bipartisan bill with Senator John Curtis from Utah, who is the lead sponsor. We actually met Senator Curtis when we were back in Washington, D.C. In April. This seems to be an intent bill at this time. It wants to focus on providing for community preparation for wildfires, to provide for forest thinning activities, which could include timber harvesting, also prescribed fires, which is when you do fires in advance to remove some of that fuel that would be there otherwise when a wildfire comes through, and a number of other things. The Senate Agriculture Committee held a hearing on this back on May 6th, and there is a similar House bill, HR 471, that actually passed out of the House earlier this year already. So again, an issue we'll continue to track on behalf of our directors with regard to this bill and others that might come out. Next slide, please. And then this is something that we haven't reported on all that much, but I just thought it would be interesting to provide an update. So, House had voted to revoke through resolutions the CARB zero emission vehicle rules. They passed two resolutions recently that would stop California from banning sales of new diesel trucks. It would also revoke the waiver allowing California and other states, which includes 10 others, to enforce the advanced clean trucks regulation. It still has to pass the Senate, so they could, kind of derail it. But for now, it did pass the House, and it would require the advanced clean trucks regulation, which is in place, currently requires medium and heavy duty truck manufacturers to sell an increasing number of zero emission vehicles from 2024 through 2035. West Basin has participated in efforts that are being led by metropolitan water districts as part of the advanced clean trucks regulations. We have a very small fleet ourselves, but we still are subject to those regulations moving forward. And so this is another issue that we work very closely with our compliance team to track. And then one last slide. I wanted to share that the Department of the Interior and U.S. Bureau of Rec recently announced 18 short-term system conservation agreements with water users in both California and Arizona. These are extensions to these agreements that we had in place last year. So far, there hasn't been a comment from the Department of the Interior on how exactly these will be funded going forward. Previously, it was through the Inflation Reduction Act funding that was made available from the previous administration. So I think they're probably still trying to figure out where that money stands and if they can still access it. These actions would save approximately 321,000 acre feet through 2026 to sustain storage levels at Lake Mead. That equates to approximately a 5-foot increase in Lake Mead elevation. Doesn't sound like a lot, but as we know, Lake Mead is huge, and every foot counts when you're kind of in a situation right now where we're in kind of the lowest level of shortage on Lake Mead, and we don't want to see it continue to reduce. So this does make a difference in that lake and those elevations. It also gives us more kind of time and buffer to develop those longer term solutions for post 2026 that are continuing between the 7 basin states. Negotiations between the upper and lower Colorado River basins states are continuing. They haven't come to any sort of agreement yet, but it is something that everybody is watching very closely, especially with the new administration. Hopefully we'll see later this year some progress being made in those areas. So with that, I'll wrap up my comments and see if there's any questions from the committee on either the state or federal update.
I have no questions. Guess I'm the only one on board right now.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, then we will move on to our final information calendar item. It's item 6C. It's our monthly Metropolitan Water District update. And for this presentation, we have Tammy Hurley.
Good afternoon again, Samantha here. So I'm here to provide an update on metropolitan item, and this information begins on page 85 of the committee packet. And also there are PowerPoint slides that begin on page 102. in the packet that help guide the updates on this report. So if we can go to that one slide, please. So the first item is regarding Pure Water Southern California. And Metropolitan staff last month had provided a full comprehensive report for the committee members on this program. So regarding, there's several different topics here that I'll cover regarding Pure Water Southern California. And first is the environmental planning. This phase began, as you recall, back in 2020. So technical studies have been completed to support this effort. And the draft environmental impact report was published just last week on May 14th. And the board certification is anticipated to happen in early 2026. Regarding program management, the first two invoices were submitted to the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation in accordance with the grant agreement that they have for this program. So the invoices were submitted in March, and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation has already paid and reimbursed Metropolitan a total of $15.6 million. And technical studies are underway to support the planning of the DPR implementation, direct potable reuse, the EIR analysis on PFAS, the substance compound, and the development of program phasing option, which includes the treated water augmentation. Metropolitan and the Los Angeles County Sanitation District are preparing a work plan, and they are gathering information to pursue the certification for Pure Water Southern California, State Senate Bill 149. This particular certification makes critical projects which are necessary for the state to meet its climate and clean energy goals, eligible for expedited judicial review. And on January 23rd, 2025, there was a meeting with the state which further identified the next steps to pursue the certification. Additional background information on Pure Water was prepared and sent to the state in March. And then regarding the advanced water purification facility, this facility will purify treated wastewater using membrane bioreactors, reverse osmosis, and ultraviolet advanced oxidation. The LA County Sanitation District will assume the responsibility of implementing this advanced water purification facility, the pretreatment, including the MBR facilities. And a draft conceptual facilities plan has been prepared to document key assumptions of these components. The final draft plan is currently being prepared. And regarding direct potable reuse, Metropolitan has completed a bench scale testing to screen the potential DPR treatment process that could be used for this program at Pure Water. And so planning of a pilot scale and demonstration scale testing is currently in progress. And regarding the conveyance pipeline system, as part of the current environmental planning phase efforts, the project team is preparing the conveyance facilities conceptual design report to support the environmental studies and permitting processes that are required by CEQA. And in addition, the preliminary design of the first two pipeline reaches is currently underway. It is anticipated to be completed by the end of this year. And Metropolitan staff are also conducting a market sounding for conveyance projects with plans to advertise for construction management, general contractor, alternative delivery pre-construction services for reaches 1 and 2 as early as July 2025. A few months ago in January, the Southern California Edison Executive Council authorized their staff to move forward with drafting a lease agreement for Metropolitan uses of Edison's right-of-way to co-locate the backbone pipeline within their transmission corridor along the San Diego River. This would minimize the overall impact on the cities and communities along that backbone alignment. And then lastly, our additional progress updates for Reach 1 and 2. First, for Reach One, this is approximately 6.3 miles long, primarily within the public rights of way in the city of Carson, with service connection for LADWP and West Basin. The current work includes utility field investigation, geotechnical work, and designing to incorporate more tunneling into this project to minimize construction risk and impact to the public. Moving on to Reach Two, this reach is approximately 7.5 miles long, primarily within the public rights of way in the cities of Long Beach and Lakewood. And that would have a service connection for Long Beach utilities. The current work includes a utility field and investigation, geotechnical work, development of a preliminary design report and drawings, as well as coordination with the city of Long Beach Utilities, Caltrans, the Army Corps of Engineers, and other permitting entities for the tunnel crossing at the 710 freeway and the Los Angeles River. So that wrapped up the update for Pure Water. I'm happy to move on to the next item. If we can go to the next slide, please. So this is regarding the business model refinement. So last year in summer 2024, the Metropolitan Board commissioned an ad hoc working group. This is comprised of the member agency general managers to analyze metropolitan business model and to propose business model refinement options. So shown on this slide here are recommendations that the ad hoc working group had developed. It identified 10 areas to explore. And these areas include treated water cost recovery, reserve policy, water sales assumptions, voluntary level payment plans, member agency exchange program, policy to support sales outside of the metropolitan service area, conservation and local resource planning, basic level of service, wet year water acquisition policy, and lastly, proportions of fixed and volumetric charges. So last month on April 22nd, the Camp Water Task Force received the business model refinement proposal. They agreed to send each proposal to their home committees. So there are 3 home committees. That includes the One Water and Stewardship Committee, the Engineering Operations and Technology Committee, and the Finance Affordability, Asset Management, and Efficiency Committee. So these committees are expected to begin discussing next month in June. And there is an anticipated action in August so that these can be incorporated into the fiscal year 2026-27 and 27-28 biannual budget deliberations. So that wraps up that update for the business model. If we can move to the next slide, please. This is regarding the climate action plan. Metropolitan released their 3rd annual report on Earth Day, which was April 22nd. This is the 3rd progress report. It highlights their achievements and last year in 2024. It also provides an overview on the progress to complete the goals and actions. The report also updates its greenhouse gas inventory and carbon budget, which tracks how Metropolitan has advanced its greenhouse gas reduction goals. And Metropolitan continues to be on track towards its 2045 carbon neutrality goal. And if we can move to the next slide, please. That wraps up the updates for program updates at Metropolitan. And then I'd just like to highlight a few areas on the water supply conditions report. On the top left corner, the Northern Sierra snowpack is above average, around 120% of the April 1st average. Storage has continued to increase at Lake Oroville, like you heard earlier. And Lake Oroville is almost full, and their capacity is 3.28 million acre feet. On the top right corner, the San Luis Reservoir, this shares the supply for both the State Water Project contractors and the Central Valley Project. And currently, the State Water Project share storage is 81% with 812,000 acre feet. Also, as you heard earlier, there was an increase to the allocation to state water project contractors. Shown in the bottom right corner here is how the allocations have increased, and we are at 50% right now for the allocations. So moving on to the Colorado River Basin, the snowpack has been tracking below average. As of May 4th, Lake Powell capacity elevation was 3,557 feet with nearly 7.6 million acre feet of storage, or also can be referred to as 33% capacity. Lake Mead's capacity elevation was 1,061 feet elevation with 8,000 million acre feet of storage, or also similarly at Powell, 33% capacity. And so precipitation conditions during the first 2 months of the year were below average throughout most of the Colorado River Basin. And in February, most of the basin precipitation was below 50% of average. It did improve in March because of storm activity that occurred. But as of April 30th, the precipitation to date is 90% of average. The forecasted unregulated inflow into Lake Powell for water year 2025 is 71% of normal. And the forecast has been steadily declining each month due to below average precipitation conditions throughout the basin. And then the bottom row shows the storage condition for metropolitan local reservoirs. So in summary, metropolitan supply estimate, the total is 1.77 million acre feet. And their current trend of demands on member agencies are approximately 1.59 million acre feet for the year. So Metropolitan is projecting a surplus of approximately 180,000 acre feet. So that concludes the update for Metropolitan Water District. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Don, I'm back on the phone now. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Thank you
Yep,
so
you're in
much.
charge.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Tammy, for that report. Don, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. Tammy, thank you for that very thorough report. Next item, I believe, is closed session. Any closed session items?
There are no closed session items.
All right, the last one is 8, director's comments, future agenda items. Director Deere?
None, thank you.
All right, I do have a few comments. First, let me thank everyone who presented today. Thank you, staff and general manager, for all your reports. They're always very thorough. I do want to mention the legislative trip that Matt talked about. I wanted to thank Matt and EJ and everyone involved, and also our lobbyists, Pete and Jeff in DC. I thought it was a very productive trip. I went along with Director Alvarez and Director Houston, and they were very productive meetings, the ones that I did attend, and I thought it was well worth the time that we spent in DC meeting with some of our congressional folks. So thank you again to staff for all your hard work. And so with that, Ms. General Manager, do you have any comments?
Madam Chair, the only comment I was going to have, you just mentioned, I just want to say thank you to Matt for leading the charge. I know our lobbyists have their boots on the ground in Washington, D.C., but having somebody in-house to assist us is a great deal of help. So thank you to Matt, and I believe Augustine helped as well. So thank you both.
Yes, thank you both, Matt and Augustine, because I know you guys are the ones that put all of this together. So thank you. With that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.